Michael, either get better at giving presentations or we got to let you go. Those were the words that my boss said to me back in October of 1994. I was a certified financial planner, and part of my job was to give retirement planning workshops. Based on evaluations I had gotten from my last 3 presentations, I wasn't doing a very good job. People were giving feedback like, too much information. Does this guy ever take a breath? Too much too fast. I feel like I've been hit by a fire hose of information. I mean, it was just one bad feedback after the other. So when my boss said to me, fix this or else, I got desperate. I picked up the phone, I started calling my friends, and that led me to an organization called Toastmasters International. I joined Toastmasters with the thought that I'll go there for 2 or 3 months, I'll fix this problem, and I'll go back to my life and things will be great. That phone call to Toastmasters in my first meeting literally changed the course of my life. It took quite a while for that to happen, but eventually I discovered that public speaking, standing in front of a group, is a learnable skill just like any other. And over time, I grew to love this topic so much that I decided to make it my life's work. I eventually retired from financial planning and I started my own company, Speaking CPR. The reason I did this is because I feel like this is a calling. I wasn't born with the gift of speaking. In fact, I had a childhood incident that scarred me so much that it held me back for 25 years. I missed out on opportunities, not just in business, but in life, to enjoy myself in the world of music or performing. I didn't take advantage of those because I had this childhood scar. Toastmasters and eventually the National Speakers Association showed me the skills and tools to manage those scars, to handle anxiety and fear, which is natural to all of us. In our brief time together today, you're going to pick up 3 key ideas. Number 1, you'll hear more about the nature of presenting in 2021 and how we have to change. Number 2, you'll pick up insights into effective business storytelling. And number 3, you'll gain insights into how to become a better virtual presenter. So let's get started. Let's talk about the nature of presenting in the year 2021. There's a new reality in the world of presenting and public speaking, and it's this. We have to be as good in front of a camera as we are in front of an audience. Once the pandemic has passed us, we're not going back to the days of live presenting the way it was before. Why is that? Companies, organizations all over the world have discovered the power of virtual presenting. I know I'm not the first person to talk about this. One idea that I haven't heard people talking about is that we are going to, as presenters, have to change the way we interact with our audiences. Online presenting has conditioned our audiences to become part of the event, part of the presentation. They've been asked to participate in chat boxes, breakout rooms, answer polls, watch videos, play in games. They're so conditioned now to being part of the presentation, we're going to have to include them when we go back on stage and stand in front of them, whether it's in the boardroom, it's in front of a group of investors, prospective clients, it doesn't matter. They now want their voice to be heard more than ever. The days of I speak, you listen, I speak, you get inspired, I speak, you take action, they're gone. They're not coming back. The remainder of this presentation is designed to give you the skills to do just that, to create an event, an experience for your audience every time you present. Let's talk about the mechanics of speaking. Now, it's true that we have to change some aspects of our presentations to make sure our audiences are involved. However, there are some aspects that haven't changed. Here are 5 key ideas about the mechanics of presenting that you should know. Number 1 is that stories are still the heart of the most memorable and meaningful presentations. Stories will cut through all the clutter, they will help you earn trust faster, and they will stick with your audience long after they've heard you speak. We'll get more into that a little bit later in this presentation. The second key idea is that you need a clear and concise walk-away message. I call this the foundational phrase. This is one sentence that your audience will remember long after your presentation. In fact, when they're talking with other people, when they're asked, well, what did John Smith talk about? He talked about stories that stick, or safer automobiles, or whatever your topic is. The shorter that foundational phrase, and it should be less than 10 words, the shorter and stickier it is, the more they're going to remember your entire presentation and its purpose. So have a clear and concise message. The third idea is to build your presentation around the question, what do you want your audience to think, feel, or do differently when you're done speaking? There has to be some change in their mindset, or else you've just entertained them. And this doesn't have to be an earth-shattering, total life-changing experience, by the way. I once heard a presenter named Akash who talked about developing a morning routine. In part of his presentation, he said, you should start every day with 5 minutes of yoga stretching. Now, I've worked out most of my life. I've been pretty consistent about it, but one area I wasn't good at was stretching. And I was having some knee and back problems at the time. This was back in 2014. I started doing 5 minutes of yoga stretching every day. I haven't missed a day since. And I also haven't had the same back and knee problems I had before. Now, that alone didn't make the difference, but it started a new habit for me. It was a simple suggestion, almost a throwaway line in his speech about 5 minutes of yoga stretching. It's made a huge difference for me. Your specific idea could be just like that. It's, again, not earth-shattering. It's not going to change somebody's life forever, but it might make an improvement. But you have to be intentional about knowing what you want them to think, feel, or do differently. The other point here is do not give them 5 things to think, feel, or do differently. The old saying that a confused mind says no, but a clear mind says go is appropriate here. Stick with one specific action. The fourth idea is inspired by the TED and TEDx phenomenon. What we've seen in the last few years is that meeting planners, organizations are asking for shorter speeches. And I think this is a fantastic trend, by the way. My coaches early on taught me that if you can't say something in 25 minutes, you're not going to say it in 45 either. There's a concept that we use called the 10-to-1 rule of thumb. That is, for every 10 minutes of speaking time, you should only be sharing one new main idea with your audience. I know you heard in a previous tip about the overall foundational phrase. That can be supported by 2 or 3 other ideas. It has to support that foundational concept so we don't create that confusion and give them multiple things to do. But support with just 1 or 2 ideas, one for every 10 minutes of speaking time. You can support that with stories, with metaphors, analogies, research, case studies, but don't overload your audience. And that leads me to the 5th point as far as mechanics for speaking, and that is avoid what I call the Chinese buffet effect. Imagine that a friend of yours calls you up and says, hey, let's run out to lunch. There's a new buffet up the street. You agree to go, you pay your money, you sit down, you grab your plate, you go fill up your plate, and you sit down and eat. And about halfway through the meal, you think, for the amount of money I spent, I'm going to get my money's worth today. So what do? You go back and you fill your plate a second time. And if you really want to be cost conscious, you're going to go back and have a 3rd plate. What happens? By the end of the 3rd plate, you're stuffed. You're ready for a nap. Too much food. The next time you're putting together a presentation and you keep stuffing more information in, ask yourself, am I going to fill my clients or my audiences with so much information that they're not going to do anything? What you want to do is give your audience, your listeners, just enough information for them to feel like they got good, valuable content, great ideas and insights, a new perspective, and that's it. Trust that your presentation is good enough that if this is a viable client, for example, they'll come to you for more. They'll want to have more insight into the business and how you can help them. If it's a new employee, Give them just enough to think, wow, I'd like to work there. I want to hear more about this. Those are 5 key ideas on the mechanics of your presentations. Number 1, use stories. Number 2, have a clear and concise message. Number 3, be crystal clear about what you want them to think, feel, or do differently when you're done speaking. Number 4, shorter is better. Number 5 is avoid the Chinese buffet effect. Do not overstuff your audience. Speech or presentation delivery is one of the most challenging aspects of this whole process. There are many misconceptions about delivery out there. One of the challenges I have with many speech coaches is that they focus first on delivery. I disagree with that. Yes, you need to be authentic. You need to have some charisma on stage. However, if you don't have a crystal clear message that will benefit me in some way, I don't care how good you look up there. That was a hard lesson for me the first 15 years of my career because I was insecure. I felt like every hair had to be in place and my shoes had to be polished. There couldn't be a spot on me, and I had to memorize every speech word for word because if I didn't, I might make a mistake, and that would be awful. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. The day I realized that I didn't want to be a polished speaker, because I'd gotten that feedback from many people. Oh, you're so polished. You look so good up there. But the day I realized that's not what I wanted, I was literally dusting my office. I had a can of a dust can called Pledge, and I'm wiping away at my desk, and all of a sudden I looked at this can of dust remover, and I realized nothing sticks to polish. And every time somebody tells me I'm polished, my message isn't sticking. That was an important day for me as a speaker and a coach, because it was the realization that we need to be more real and authentic, which means you're going to make some mistakes. People aren't there to make sure your hair is perfect or that your suit is finely pressed and it's $1,000 suit or a $2,000 suit. They don't care about that. What they care about is getting some meaningful insight from you. That's why you're there. Now, with that said, a big concern I have is that speakers typically come to me with one of 2 attitudes. Number 1 is I need to memorize my speech, or number 2, I just wing it. I do so much better, Michael, when I wing it. Both of these are problems. You've already heard why with the memorization. Memorization makes you robotic. It feels like you're reading, and nobody wants to be read to. Especially in this day and age, we have so much information coming at us. We don't need that. Just send us a PDF, we'll read it and be done with it. The reason you don't want to wing it is because there's no structure. You've already heard about the importance of a foundational concept. You build your entire speech around that. People who wing it typically go off track and never get back on track. In fact, they can't see the tracks. They're so far away from it. So you don't want either one of those. What's the solution? My suggestion for delivery is to take a rough outline and bullet point your presentation and then begin to go through it. And at first, even if you write it out word for word, that's okay. Start going through the speech. And what's going to happen is the more you practice and repeat, you're going to find that certain words that are written on paper do not feel comfortable to you because that's not how you speak. I'm a firm believer that if you're practicing a presentation over and over and you keep getting stuck, it's because that stuck point is written in a way that is not natural to you. It's not conversational. So when that happens, what I suggest is you throw the script out for a moment, talk about that part of the speech like you're sitting across a lunch table from a friend or a colleague, and see what comes out of your mouth. That's the better way to say it. Let's say you've got a 15-minute presentation to make to investors. I suggest you break that into chunks, maybe 3 5-minute chunks. And the reason you want to do that is because every time you begin to practice, what happens? Life interferes, especially in the age of COVID when you're home most of the time. The dog starts barking, the doorbell rings with an Amazon package, you get a phone call. you're going to get interrupted. Here's what's going to happen to you. You're going to start practicing. You'll get the inevitable interruption. You'll stop. You'll go deal with the interruption. You'll come back. And where will you pick up your rehearsal? That's right, at the beginning. And you're going to do this several times. You're going to get really good at the first few minutes of your presentation, but the middle and back half will not get the same amount of attention. So break your rehearsal up into thirds or fourths, depending on the length of it. But that's a pretty safe number. Give each one equal attention. That way, instead of doing the opening 20 times and the middle and the last part 2, you're going to even it up. They'll each get about 6, 7, 8 rehearsals, but you'll have that internalized. But do it as much as you can. Again, repetition will make you more comfortable with it, and that's going to make you more conversational and authentic. You won't sound like you're reading, as in a memorized speech, and you won't be winging it because you will have a flow. And even if you do get interrupted in the middle of your talk, or if you get this new idea, you can bring that in, but then you know how to get back on track. You'll be able to see the track. Now, the last idea for you with regard to delivery is this. The most important aspect of delivery is silence. So many speakers do not use this effective tool. Why is silence so important? Number one, when you ask an audience a question, you got to give them time to think about it. Number two is when you make an important point, they need to think about the implication of that point to their lives. And number three is when you have something funny to say, you got to give them time to laugh. Now, the reason most people struggle with this, and I know from my own experience and working with many others, is that when you're quiet, when you're in the middle of a presentation and you're not saying anything, your brain is screaming at you, say something, you're going to lose their attention. They're going to get distracted. They're going to pick up their phone. The reality is just the opposite. If you've made a good point, if you've asked an important question, they're thinking about the implication in their lives. They're feeling it. You've created an experience for them. It's not just a bunch of words. But you've got to give them a chance to do that. I will tell you, the first few times that you practice stretching out your silence, it's incredibly uncomfortable. That's like a muscle. It's like going to the gym. You don't get good at this going to the gym one time. You've got to go over and over again. Same thing with silence. The first time you practice this, just practice silence for 2 or 3 heartbeats. And the next time you give the presentation, stretch it out to 3 or 4 heartbeats of silence. And keep pushing, pushing, pushing. Those are some of the keys to effective delivery of your presentation. Remember, you want to be conversational and authentic. How do you get there? Repetition. Practice over and over again until it becomes second nature. Don't memorize it because you sound red. Don't wing it because you sound like you don't know what you're talking about or you're just all over the map. Internalization gives you a track that you can go on. And if you step off track, just to make a side point or a new idea comes to mind, you can get back on track. And never forget, the most important delivery device you have is saying nothing. That wraps up our opening about the state of presenting in 2021. We have a new reality now. We have to be good in front of a camera and in person. But some of the mechanics are still the same as they always were. We still have to have those stories. We have to have a main point. But we also have to be shorter in our presentations. We have to be to the point so that we can have a sticking point. And then third is delivery. We have to be effective through conversational presentations that are authentic. And we have to make really good use of silence to make sure our points stick. Now let's talk about the power of storytelling in business. There once was a young woman named Yvonne, and for much of her life, she dreamed about working at a large multinational corporation. It was a consumer goods company. She wanted to help the world by working with this company. One day, after graduating college, she got a job offer from this company. She was so excited. She boarded a plane, she flew off to a new big city, and she landed, she got established, and she started her job. And things went great. Her life was excellent. She had no problems, and she lived happily ever after. Is that a story? Yeah, in the traditional sense, you can make the case that, yeah, it's kind of a story. But from a business storytelling standpoint, no, it's not a very good story. What you're going to pick up in this section are some ideas, first of all, on why business storytelling is so important. You're also going to hear why that story wasn't very effective and how I could make it better with one simple sentence. Let's talk about why storytelling is important. It's a fairly common topic in today's business communication world. Tell your stories. Get out there. Tell people your narrative. That sounds good, but I'm finding that most people still don't understand how or why they should tell those stories. Here's one simple reason. No matter what your position, even if you're the CEO of a company, you have other people out there that have similar job titles to you. If you're in sales, you're definitely facing competitors every day. And most competitors can match you in many areas: price, service, quality of product, etc. The one asset you have is that nobody can duplicate your stories. Now, there are many different types of stories. There are two in particular that I do recommend. One is the origin or founder story. It talks about why a company was started, or it tells about why you got into the field that you're in today. That's popular to help people understand why you do what you do. And it gives them some trust that if things go bad or if we hit tough times, that they can depend on you to be there because your intense why, your reason for being there, is greater than the bottom line. Now, my favorite type of business story is the successful client story. That is where you take the listener on a journey of someone who was struggling before they met you. You enter the picture, you introduce a new perspective, a new service, idea, product. That person's life begins to get better, and eventually they achieve success. An important note here is that stories must have a purpose. You heard about that in the previous section about presentations in general. You have to have a central message. You've got to know what you want your audience to think, feel, or do differently. That holds true with your stories too. What is the main reason you're sharing this story? What's the point you're trying to get across? Now, a key concept here that a lot of people struggle with is they'll tell me, Michael, people don't want to hear about me. Now, I understand that reaction, but here's an important concept that one of my coaches taught me years ago. Your story is about you, but it's for them. Go back to my opening story when I talked about being in my boss's office. I was a financial advisor. I was out giving presentations, and I was getting poor evaluations. When I was sharing that, did you think back to a time when you were sitting in your boss's office getting a tough evaluation, maybe an ultimatum? Or did you think about a time when you were giving poor presentations and got bad feedback? My guess is you did. And that's the reason I tell that, is to open up with something that will connect me to you. Notice I didn't come out thumping my chest, telling you what a great coach I am and how I've had all this success. That's a problem that many speakers have. They think that that's what the audience wants. Now, they don't want to think that you're a failure. Okay, that's not good. However, don't lead with success. Be willing to open up, be authentic, be vulnerable enough to share a time of your life when you were struggling. If you want to connect with people, there's no faster way to do it than a story of struggle, setback. Share your scars, as one of my friends says. Let us know where you've hurt, because we will relate to you much faster. With that said, we do at some point want to see success. How should you structure a story? And I'm going to use the successful client story as an example. Here's a short version of one of my signature stories. It's a story of my client named Patty. Patty I met back in 2009 at a Chamber of Commerce holiday party. She approached me because she's, in her words, I've done something really stupid. I've agreed to give the keynote for the Women of Excellence dinner next year, and I'm not sleeping at night. I'm sick to my stomach. I can't think about anything else. Can you help me?" Well, after some further discussion, she did hire me. We started working together. In the first month or so, it wasn't going well. In fact, at one point, I suggested to her, "Patty, I think you need to fire me." That surprised her. She said, "Well, why?" I said, "Because you're not progressing. You know, when you hired me, you told me one of your biggest challenges was you keep going off track. You get all these ideas. You've gone way over time. People get upset with you. I don't see you improving there. I'm not criticizing you. I just don't think I'm the right coach for you." Well, she went home that day. She did some soul searching, called me back the next day and said, "Look, I'm not trying to break up with you, but it's not you, it's me." It really is me, Michael. I haven't been taking this seriously enough. I would like to work with you. Please, let's keep going. And we did. Once we got past that hurdle, she still had some struggles, but she dedicated herself. She did the work. She stretched outside of her comfort zone. And the night of her big presentation, 320 people stood up and gave her a rousing ovation, which is nice. But what was more important was that people were coming up to her after the event and literally handing her checks for her foundation. That had never happened before. That wasn't even the best part. The best part was she came up to me after all of that and said, "I can't believe what just happened here. That was so much fun. I can't wait to do this again." When I talk to prospective clients, they hear that story, they think that's the result I want. Just think about how Patty transformed, and that's what great stories are about, transformation. She went from someone who was sick to her stomach, couldn't sleep at night, was thinking about this all the time, getting stressed out, to, "I can't wait to do this again. That was so much fun." And oh, by the way, it helped raise a lot of money for her foundation. Her success didn't stop the night of the presentation. A year later, we were having lunch, getting caught up, and she told me, "Michael, you wouldn't believe what's happened since last year. I was given the task of raising money for a local boys and girls club. And I used a lot of the techniques we worked on. I'm out there speaking to the community. We've raised over $1 million. I can't thank you enough for the work we did together. I appreciate this so much. You sticking with me, us working together. You saw something in me I couldn't see. And now I'm having a blast. I'm leading a team of other people. We're out raising money to do good in the community." That's the new life. See, she didn't just have one successful night and then go back to her old ways. That new way of thinking and feeling was embedded in her, so much so that it had a profound impact a year later. The 5 key elements are: you've got a relatable character, someone that has a problem that you can relate to. That individual has conflict, internal because of the feelings they have, and external. In my case, it was that we were struggling with the coaching. But there's a goal in mind. The conflict reveals the real goal. Yes, she wanted to give the speech, but she wanted to feel better about it. So we have a clear goal, which is the 3rd step. The 4th is the moment of success. That was when she gave the speech. People were coming up and giving her money and volunteering time to the foundation, and she felt better about speaking. The 5th step is the new life. It is now permanently entrenched in her. She's a confident, authentic, and persuasive speaker. As you're putting your stories together about client success, follow that format and people will be drawn to you. When I share this story in my presentations, people approach me and say, "I want the same result she got. Can you help me?" Now that we've talked about storytelling, let's do a quick overview of virtual presenting and how you can become better when you're in front of a camera speaking to people literally, in some cases, all over the world. Congratulations. You are now in the TV business. I know what you may be thinking. No, I'm not, Michael. I'm a CEO of a large multinational corporation. I am a sales manager. I'm not in the TV business. Since March of 2020, at least in the United States, and I know it's been different times for others of you, You are now in the TV business because you've had to communicate through a camera to a rectangle. That's not going away after the pandemic and lockdown have passed us. You heard about this earlier, the new reality. You also heard about some of the similarities between presenting live and presenting to a camera. Now you need to hear about the differences because these are critical. The biggest mistake I see people making is that they are treating the virtual presentation the same way they do the live. In other words, they stand in front of the camera, they don't move, and that's all they do for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes or more. Or the other extreme is they put up a bunch of slides and they hide behind the slides for the entire presentation. Neither of those is good. Think about what you've seen in this video. Yes, you've seen me standing in front of my background here in my studio, but you've also seen images pop up, words, and it's constantly changing. Here in America, you probably know one of our big events is the Super Bowl of American football. Well, recently I was watching a video from the first Super Bowl held in 1967. And there was a particular play where the camera followed a player running down the field. And when the play was over, the camera followed that same player all the way back to what's called the huddle, where the team gathers for the next play. That clip took 23 seconds. I was blown away by this. It's like, wow. That you don't see that today. If you see the camera stay on somebody for 2.3 seconds today, that's a miracle. We have learned and we've been conditioned to changing so fast that we have to do that as presenters too. I'm not saying change every 2 to 3 seconds. That's not it. But we cannot stand there and just talk at the camera and talk at people. They're going to check out. They're going to check their phones, their iPads, or whatever devices are in front of them. We have to constantly change it up, which leads to the critical aspect of virtual presenting, and that is engagement. We've got to engage our audiences from start to finish. You'll notice each of these sections of this presentation, I have started with a story. I do that because I want to hook you emotionally. I want to bring you into my world so you think about your world. Effective stories do that. There are several ways that you can create engagement with your audiences. Number one, and I think everybody does this now, is the chat box. Here's an observation I've made about the chat box though. There are some people that I will term chat box extroverts. They love to get in there and make comments. And that's fine. I'm not criticizing them at all. In fact, I think they're necessary because they will give a different perspective on the ideas that you or other presenters are sharing. And this is where we have to begin to change our mindset as speakers. In the old days, it would be considered offensive or rude if someone were to interrupt your talk to have a side conversation. Well, they're doing that in the chat box. But not everybody enjoys doing that. So if we just left it up to the chat box, a lot of people would be thinking, I don't like typing, so I'm not going to do that. I still have some thoughts, some ideas I'd like to add to the conversation. So we can't just leave it at the chat box. We have to use breakout rooms. One of the big reasons I like breakout rooms is because many people are intimidated by looking at a gallery screen of 40, 50, 60 people. Send them to a breakout room of 2, 3, 4 people. They're much more comfortable. They're more likely to open up and share their ideas. When you bring the whole group back together, don't just leave it at the conversations that they had there. Open the floor back up and ask for ideas that people shared in the breakout rooms. Now, because some people will be intimidated, don't ask individuals to share their own ideas. Ask them to share an idea they heard from someone else in their breakout room. That will stir real conversation. I'm a huge fan of polling. You're giving your audience a chance for their voices to be heard, and you're also getting fantastic feedback and research. Quick example. When the pandemic hit and the lockdown began in spring of 2020, I knew from my own interactions with people that many individuals were going to struggle with this new world of virtual presenting. I started doing my workshops and I would ask the question, what's your biggest challenge? Invariably, 75, 80% of the time, the number one answer was looking into the camera, right? Most people struggle because they were used to looking at the screen down here and they did not have that habit of looking at the camera to communicate with the audience. I would do this poll periodically throughout the year. Somewhere around October, 6 months into the pandemic, I asked that same question. The number one answer became, how do I keep people's attention from start to finish? Looking at the camera, on average, became the number 5 answer. Here's why this is important. If I hadn't kept asking that question, if I had just assumed that the answer I was getting in March and April and the spring was the same, I would have become irrelevant because I would have been teaching them how to do something they already knew how to do. They had gotten used to looking at the camera. What they needed help with was engagement. So if I didn't do the research, I wouldn't know that. And I would not be getting hired as much because people would say, well, he's old news. So that's another critical reason to use polls. You can multi-purpose all of this research. Do it in the presentation though. Don't wait until afterwards because then you begin chasing them down, and the further they get away from your presentation, the less impact it will have. The other key to effective virtual presenting is to use a co-host. If this was a live event, I would definitely have a co-host because that person could monitor the chat box for me. They can handle any technical issues. The individual could make sure people are coming in and out and reducing or muting any background noise, anything that's distracting. I've tried to do this on my own, and I've done 500 online presentations, workshops, coaching sessions. I've gotten pretty good at virtual, but it's really hard, it's draining, and it's stressful to do it by yourself. I always have a co-host when I go live. I highly recommend you do that too. Save yourself a lot of anxiety and pressure. And it's better for the audience. Because when you have a co-host, they're getting a different perspective. It doesn't have to be just you they're listening to. And people appreciate that. It's another type of change. Remember to ask yourself this question with your virtual presentations. How often can we change this up, change the view, get them involved, send them away, give them a break, whatever it takes to keep constant change so they're engaged. Remember my example of the old American football game. 23-second clip versus today, they don't keep their camera on somebody for 2 seconds. One of the most common questions I get is about the background and the setting that we're presenting in. For the first year of the pandemic, people were pretty forgiving that yes, maybe you have to speak from your home and there's kids running around, dogs barking. Look, we get it. However, going forward, because, as I say, we're in the TV business now, and this has to be an important part of our presentations, people are going to expect the look to be better. I know not everybody has a large budget to invest in a studio, and this is what I do for a living. I'm a coach, I'm a professional speaker, and a trainer. I've got to have a good-looking studio. That's just part of the game. But some ideas for you. Number one, get a professional-looking background. I'm not a fan of the virtual background anymore. Once in a great while, I see one that's well done, but usually you get that ghosting effect and people disappear, right? I could step back and all of a sudden you're just seeing the background. That's not a good look. That disconnects you from your audience. Make sure your background is not cluttered. One of the worst backgrounds, in my estimation, from a business standpoint, is when you put pictures of your family and books behind you. I think you know why. Probably know what I'm about to say. I've been on too many calls where I find myself doing this. I got that book. Oh, that's a really good book. You know, that makes me think, maybe, is that on my Kindle? And all of a sudden, I'm distracted from the presentation. I'm not thinking about what this person's saying at all because I'm focused on the book. Or I'm looking at pictures and I'm thinking, I wonder if that's his daughter, because he talked about his daughter. Oh, she's so cute. I wonder how old she is now. Same effect. Keep the distractions to a minimum. You'll notice two items behind me. It's my director's chair that says I'm a coach and my branding of my company. That's it. I want your attention to be on me, or if I send you to a breakout room or to some kind of survey question or poll, that's where I want your attention to be. The fewer the distractions, the better. Lighting is important. It's one of the most critical aspects, and it's one of the most frustrating. Lighting changes throughout the day. If your office has a window in it, and mine does, it's changed in just recording this video. I've had to make a couple of adjustments. But there are some tips for you on how to become a better virtual presenter. Remember, this is the new reality. We have to accept that we're now in the TV business, and we have to be as good on camera as we are in front of a live audience. In fact, I contend that if you want to be as good in front of a camera as you are in front of real people, you're going to have to put 2 to 3 times the effort in. Because it's not just you walking on stage with an internalized presentation. You got to know the presentation. You also have to know the technology. You have to know how to bring people in, let them leave the meeting, have the chat box, use the polling, send them to breakout rooms, pull up videos, audios, bring people on. That's a lot of work. And again, you're going to want a co-host for that, but you still have to know how to do all of that. And the message still has to stick, and the presentation has to be world class. It takes a lot more time, but I promise you, number one, we have to do it because this is going to be the expectation going forward. But number two, if you're willing to put in the time, you will stand out because most people won't. It has been a terrific pleasure to be with you today. If I can answer any questions at all, if you have any struggles, feel free to contact me, Mike at Speaking CPR. Visit my website, speakingcpr.com. And as I mentioned earlier on, when I talked about being in my boss's office and being told, fix this or else, I had to face a lifelong fear of speaking that was born out of an embarrassing childhood experience. And because of that, I know the fear, the anxiety, the stress that presentations can put on you. But if you put some simple actions into place, create the right mindset, develop a meaningful and memorable message, and deliver it authentically, you can have a lasting impact on the world. And ultimately, that's what we need. We need to help one another. There's never been more distrust in the world than we have today. We can tear down those walls of distrust by authentically presenting ourselves and giving people ideas that can help improve their lives. Enjoy the rest of the conference.